This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
I scream. You scream. We all scream. Because Wendy's famous small classic Frosty is just $1 for a limited time. More screaming, happy screaming, summer screaming, dollar small classic Frosty screaming! But please don't scream in the drive-thru. It hurts the employees' ears. Get a $1 small classic Frosty for a limited time, only at Wendy's.
U.S. price and participation may vary. A la carte only. Not valid for delivery. Limit 10 per transaction. Price may be higher in Alaska and Hawaii.
Welcome to Generals of World War II, The Art of Command. I am your host, John Biscardo, and with me today is the great Quin Cho, all the way from Chicago, Illinois. Hello, Quin.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. For those of you not familiar with Quin, he is a fellow at Pacific Atrocities Education. He's also an accomplished author. He has 2 books, Competing Empires in Burma and The Rise of the Kwantung Army, Volume 1. Both are available on Amazon. And Quin, could you tell us what those 2 books are about?
Yeah. The first book, Competing Empires in Burma, is a chronicle of the China-Burma-India Theater of World War II. It covers the years 1941 to 5. The second book, The Rise of the Kwantung Army, Japan's Empire in Manchuria to 1932, is about a Japanese field army that played an outsized role in the initiation of hostilities in Northeast Asia during the 1930s, often without the consent or approval of the central authorities in Tokyo.
Okay. And both of those are available on Amazon. And today we're going to talk about kind of a controversial general, which is Vinegar Joe Joseph Stilwell of the U.S. Army, who was born in Palatka, Florida. So how was his upbringing, and what might have it been like to grow up in a post-Civil War United States?
Well, Stilwell, he was born in Florida, but he grew up in Yonkers, New York, and he was the son of a highly religious disciplinarian father. He grew up at a time that was defined by industrialization, the Gilded Age, the last phases of U.S. settler colonial expansion in the West, and eventually imperial adventures into the Caribbean, the Pacific, and Eastern Asia. This period of industrialization and nation building in the United States, which was concurrent with the similar time frame and period on the rest of the world, was associated with standardization, regimentation, and discipline. Nonetheless, young Stilwell was somewhat rebellious and actually got into some trouble when he did a post-grad year at Yonkers High School, and he was part of an event where an administrator got punched, and this led to his friend group's collective expulsion. While Stilwell technically had graduated, he went to West Point soon thereafter, at the behest of his father, in part.
Probably a good idea. Yeah. To get discipline, that's the right school to go to. He graduates from the U.S. Military Academy in 1904 and was commissioned an infantry officer. So why do you think West Point produced so many influential American leaders?
Well, West Point has been the official United States military academy since 1804, when Thomas Jefferson designated it as such. And it's like a variety of other military academies around the world that were also a part of the broader processes of nation building and the formation of standardized, centralized standing armies. It allowed for an officer corps to be trained in a standard way with a standard doctrine that could be taught. The curriculum was designed by a fellow named Sylvanus Thayer, the kind of the gist of the curriculum, and this emphasized independent study, small class sizes, active participation in class discussions, with an emphasis on critical thinking, problem solving, and optimizing for efficiency. All of these are the key traits of the most capable field commanders, and hence is why West Point is the United States Military Academy.
Right. Yeah. After graduating, Stilwell serves in the Philippines, gaining experience in overseas operations. So, how can service abroad help prepare officers for future command?
So, service abroad allows officers to interact with other militaries and officers, observe them, take note of said military's doctrine, training, weapons, and command methods and structures, which can potentially be incorporated into that of the home country's armed forces. Officers can also learn how to evaluate and analyze the capabilities of other militaries and gather intelligence on potential foes. They get to witness other economies, cultures, and political systems and how these affect the national power of future allies and or adversaries. And they can also learn to work with allies and partners, collaborate, form coalitions, and navigate complex political situations.
Great point. That's foreshadowing for what he's going to have to do soon.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, Stilwell was not especially good at being someone who could navigate these political situations effectively and talk to and handle the various allies. He didn't work with others particularly well.
Yeah, that segues to my next question, where he became known for his blunt personality and criticism of incompetence, earning the nickname Vinegar Joe. So, what were the advantages and disadvantages of his blunt leadership style?
So the advantages were that when Stilwell pretty bluntly would say what he thought, there was no ambiguity regarding where he stood. You know what he thought, what he expected, and what his standards were, and what his philosophy was as a general. He was a very aggressive general, Stilwell. We'll get into that. This meant that many of his subordinates were motivated to work hard and to please him, lest they invoke his ire. And it also can expedite the decision-making process. The bluntness of figures such as Stilwell. It allows for a faster OODA loop. That's a term in the United States military that describes the cycle of observing, orienting, deciding, and acting. That is essentially the process of military decision-making. The trouble with Stilwell's rather blunt command style was that it could demoralize subordinates and squash creativity and initiative. But even more importantly, in Stilwell's case, because he was in a pretty important strategic level position, was that it could lead to extreme friction with allies and superiors, who might be unaccustomed to hearing such harsh realities in an unfriendly tone from someone like Stilwell. So there were certainly drawbacks as well to Stilwell's bluntness and forthrightness.
During World War I, he doesn't see any combat, but he serves in staff positions. So how important is it to work on staff groups and staff assignments in terms of his officer development?
So in general, I think we should describe like what positions there are on staffs, to just kind of give a primer. In general, there's the operations section, intelligence section. There's generally some sort of administrative or personnel section, maybe both even, and then there's like a logistics section. These are the general staff subdivisions. There are some militaries have more or less, depends on which one we're talking about. But during World War I, Stilwell was an intelligence officer in the Fourth Corps. And being part of an intelligence section allows Stilwell and other such officers who are on intelligence sections to understand the process behind obtaining information, whether via open source, human intelligence, or signals intelligence, among others, how to evaluate it, and what degree of certainty can be assigned to a given nugget of information. Such intelligence positions and other types of staff positions also cultivate great attention to detail, meticulous investigation and planning, and the absorption and analysis of large volumes of information on a daily basis. These staff assignments allow officers to gain a broader view of operational realities beyond their immediate tactical commands in the field, for instance, that of a company or a battalion, and gain experience in making long-term plans and working with others. Staff assignments also allow officers to diversify their skill sets beyond merely commanding small units.
Yeah, I'm going to combine my next two questions into one. Between the wars, Stilwell studied the Chinese language and developed a deep interest in China. He also served multiple tours in China, became one of the U.S. Army's leading experts in the country. So why is a cultural and language knowledge valuable for military leaders at this time?
Teens share everything. That may include the bacteria that can cause meningococcal disease known as meningitis. Even if your teen's been vaccinated in the past, they could still be missing meningitis vaccinations. Ask your teen's doctor or visit meningitis.com today. Sponsored by GSK.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao. A gift from Italy to your home. San Pellegrino Ciao is a flavored sparkling water made with real fruit juice, finished with a pinch of Sicilian salt for a perfectly balanced taste. So which flavor will you choose? Peach, lime, blood orange, cherry, or maybe the all-new limoncello? Crafted in Italy with 0 grams of added sugar. San Pellegrino Ciao. Buy it now.
Well, cultural knowledge allows military leaders to interact with peers and superiors in other countries and build understanding of them. In Stilwell's case, he did form some understanding of China, albeit China was changing so rapidly in the 1920s and 30s. It was probably difficult to stay astride of developments, and there were certain things during the war that he did not understand. Cultural knowledge can also help military leaders anticipate enemy actions and avoid miscommunications and construct alliances. Linguistic knowledge, Stilwell was fluent in Chinese, allows leaders to directly communicate with their peers and contemporaries in a given country and thereby avoid errors in translation or mistranslations or things being lost in translation, which happens quite a bit actually in international relations and intermilitary cooperation. Stilwell's expertise of the broader East Asia region and those of officers like him, allows them to understand the capabilities, intentions, and aims of the various states and armies in a given region, and allows them to put them in the context of the given state's culture, history, or broader strategic situation. What this means is that officers are able, in theory, and Stilwell's actually a bit of an exception to this, as we'll get into, but in theory, they should be able to empathize with the position of the host country or aligned country that they're dealing with, or alternatively, understand and anticipate the actions of their enemies in a more capable manner.
Yeah, good point. After the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, Stilwell is appointed chief of staff to Chiang Kai-shek, who's the nationalist leader of China. And he's also commander of the U.S. forces, China-Burma-India Theater, the CBI Theater. Why is this an important front or important secondary front for the U.S.?
So the China-Burma-India Theater, as you alluded to, was not the U.S.'s primary strategic focus. Europe was the primary theater. There was a broader grand strategy of pursuing Europe first in the United States and in Britain. And the eventually in the Pacific, the island hopping campaign across the various atolls and islands of the Pacific took precedence, both materially and because of geographic factors, over the CBI theater. Nonetheless, the CBI theater was still an important theater for the United States and was regarded as such by President Roosevelt, who sought to keep China in the war and pinning down over 1 million Japanese soldiers, which was the number of men deployed in China from the Imperial Japanese Army at peak deployment levels. Now, President Roosevelt had a quote. He noted that if China had not held out, imagine how many divisions of Japanese troops could have been transferred to other fronts. They could have stormed Australia, taken India, etc. They also could have conceivably attacked into the Soviet Union, which would have been a bit of an issue given that the Germans had also conducted Operation Barbarossa in June of 1941 and were knocking on the door of Moscow in November and December. It's a bit disturbing to think about the reality that might have been if the Japanese had also been able to attack in the Soviet Far East. Hence, Roosevelt from 1940 or so on was determined to send military aid to the Chinese. He sent the American volunteer group of 100 aircraft to defend the Burma Road even before the war broke out. While China was a secondary front during the war, it still was a rather important front for the United States and was regarded as such by President Roosevelt.
Yeah. In 1942, Japanese forces invaded Burma, forcing Allied troops into a difficult retreat. How was Stilwell's relationship with the British Army and other Allied leaders?
So despite Stilwell's experience as a intelligence officer and as a someone who was experienced in international affairs, he was not very good at working with others or working with his allies. And this was in part because he had a pretty low opinion of them and was not afraid to let them know what he thought. He was a very blunt man. The reason that Stilwell had to work with allies such as the British Army and Chiang Kai-shek was because of, one, the multinational nature of the theater that he was assigned to. It's at the intersection of the British colonies of Burma and India and also of China, which got a lot of military aid and materiel via the Burma Road. And two, more importantly, because of the multitude of responsibilities and roles that he was tasked with. These included being the commander of the U.S. Army in the CBI Theater, the chief of staff to Chiang Kai-shek, a supervisor of CBI Lend-Lease programs in China, U.S. representative on any military council in the CBI Theater, and the commander of the Chinese Expeditionary Force, or at least in a nominal sense. Stilwell was supposed to be the commander of the CEF, but his Chinese contemporaries, such as He Yingqian, who was also in a chief of staff position for Chiang's National Revolutionary Army, they didn't really see it this way. These figures believe Stilwell was supposed to merely assist the Chinese field commander in tactical planning. Such confusion over the command structure in the CBI theater was a great source of frustration for Stilwell and many of his contemporaries, and was indeed the source of many of why their disagreements couldn't easily be resolved. This was very troublesome. So Stilwell, generally speaking, to get to the source of what the disagreements were, he was a believer in overland defensives, concentrating troops, attacking in unison, and cutting off and enveloping vulnerable and overextended enemy units. His Chinese and British counterparts generally preferred defense, and then, if the circumstances were right, to counterattack overextended enemy units. The disparity in philosophy between Stilwell and his Chinese allies was made clear during the Battle of Tungu in March 1942, during which the 200th Motorized Division, this is China's only motorized division, they arrive in the city before any of its non-motorized counterparts were moving on foot, and they established defensive positions. Isolated, they were soon enveloped on three sides by the Japanese 55th Infantry Division. Stillwell wanted the 22nd, 55th, and 96th Chinese divisions to attack and counterattack the flanks of the overextended Japanese and relieve their compatriots in the 200th Motorized Division. But Chiang Kai-shek nixed this behind his back, and Stilwell was rather upset about it. He instead, Chiang, preferred to defend Mandalay, some 200 miles to the north, and you can get a taste of Stilwell's incredulousness and his rather strident tone and feelings about the matter in this diary from April 1st, 1942, this diary entry. He said, quote, "Am I the April Fool? From March 19th to April 1st in Burma, struggling with the Chinese, the Japanese, my own people, the supply, the medical service, etc., incidentally with the Japanese. Through stupidity, fear, and the defensive attitude, we have lost a grand chance to slap the Japanese back at Tungu. The basic reason is Chiang Kai-shek's meddling. He can't keep his hands off. 1,600 miles from the front, he writes endless instructions to do this and that based on fragmentary information and cockeyed conceptions of tactics. He curses the British for falling back and does the same thing himself without reference to them. He is hipped on holding Mandalay and can't see that the way to do that is to lick the Japanese at Tungu. His constant interference and letter writing have the effect of completely nullifying my little authority. I have no troops, no bodyguard, no authority to shoot anybody. The army and division commanders are vitally interested in doing what they think he wants them to do. Why should they obey me?" Anecdotes such as this show Stilwell's frustration with the command structure and also with his more cautious and conservative allies who did not adopt Stilwell's aggressive understanding of warfare and whose indecisiveness he was rather put off by.
Yeah, it sounds like two micromanagers who are very stubborn and don't like to work well together. But we'll come back to that on the legacy. He played a major role in organizing the construction of the Lido Road, later known as Stilwell Road, to reconnect China with Allied supply lines. Why are logistics and supply routes so critical in this part of the world? Is it just bad roads, or is there more to it?
Well, in part, it is bad roads. You're dealing with a country that didn't really have a lot of paved roads, hardly any, especially in the region of the Burma-India border. There were none across the Burma-India border. But it's also the terrain, which is mountainous jungle in many parts of Burma, especially the Burma-India border. It's a matter of the weather. Half the year you have the monsoon season, and during this period of very heavy rains, you're dealing with mud roads, basically. You're dealing with roads that are basically impassable and make military operations nearly impossible. So the Allies and the Japanese also had to find workarounds around these various problems. For the Japanese, they basically utilized rapid light infantry outflanking maneuvers, traversing the jungles and small bodies of water to get behind road-bound Allied units in the first phases of the first Burma campaign in the first part of 1942. And they were basically able to seize their supplies from the enemy. They relied on captured supplies, and this allowed them to get away with having a limited logistical complement, limited logistical train. But after the British adopted all-around defense tactics during the Second Battle of Arakan and stood their ground to defend headquarters and supply depots and the like, and with the reserve and with aerial resupply, that was part of the Allied solution to the logistical problems of Burma. They were able to basically force the Japanese into positional fighting, which they didn't really have the artillery or supply complements to sustain, and hence they were basically smashed between the point of the all-around defense and the reserve, the forces that attempted to outflank the British, the Japanese forces, and they would often starve to death or alternatively be chewed up by British artillery and infantry. The Allies, for their part, they utilized aerial resupply once they maintained air superiority, but they also used a variety of other means as well. To give an example of some of these means, during 1945, William Slim, during his offensive into Burma, he built 541 rafts on the Chinduan River to ferry supplies to the front line, and then built another 100-mile road to the front. Such attention to logistics allowed the British and also the Americans to escape the fate of the Japanese, who paid less attention to logistical matters and were therefore at the mercy of the elements and the weather and the terrain in Burma.
Great point. Yeah, though with Stilwell, his relationship with Chiang Kai-shek became increasingly strained due to disagreements over strategy and leadership. So, how did the disagreements between the Allies affect the war effort? And was there a lot of corruption in China's army leadership?
So, to answer both those questions, there were a good many disagreements between Stilwell and Chiang. Stilwell basically wanted to take the offensive in northern Burma to build the Ledo Road and establish an overland supply route to China in lieu of the Burma Road, to replace the Burma Road that the Japanese had captured. He sought to arm X-Force, that's a Chinese army in India that he was responsible for training and equipping, and Y-Force, that's a Chinese force in Yunnan province in southwestern China on the Burmese border, with American Lend-Lease weapons. And he was the one in charge of overseeing the distribution of these weapons, the Lend-Lease weapons, and he sought to converge on the Japanese 18th and 56th Infantry Divisions from two axes. Basically, Stilwell preferred to take the offensive to rebuild another road from India through Burma to China. Chiang instead preferred to conduct defensive operations in central and southern China, with defense in depth and withdraw delay tactics being the key elements of his force's operational practice. Overextended or isolated individual Japanese units could then be attacked, outflanked, enveloped, or forced to withdraw in selective counterattacks. Chiang, instead, for his offensive kind of complement, instead preferred General Chennault's 14th Air Force. Chennault and Chiang's wife, they understood that, or believed that Chennault, with 200 bombers and 300 fighters, could win the war against Japan single-handedly by attriting its shipping and supply lines. Stilwell thought this particular point of view was a little bit ridiculous, because the aircraft and the airfields that they were on needed to be defended by infantry. And he believed that Chiang's forces were not really up to snuff, in part because of the extreme corruption that was rampant throughout Chiang's coalition, which Stilwell was very upset about and noted. Some examples of this corruption. Tang En-bo, who was the deputy commander of the First War Area, allegedly sold Lend-Lease goods with the Japanese along the Yangtze River. Other similarly minded entrepreneurial commanders likely did similar acts. Tang and other generals also lied routinely about the number of men on their rosters to collect their paychecks, to the extent that possibly 30% of Chiang's forces may have been fictitious. Chiang's inner circle at the highest levels of the government and finance were also engaged in corruption. TV Sung, the brother of Chiang's wife, Song Meiling, they manipulated exchange rates and engaged in insider trading to enrich themselves. For reference, Harry Truman said that the Sungs, that's the family of Chiang's wife, were thieves, every damn one of them. They stole $750 million of the $3.8 billion that we sent Chiang Kai-shek. They stole it and it's invested in real estate down in Sao Paulo and some right here in New York. So this basically gives you an idea of the corruption that Stilwell was dealing with, and that was pretty ubiquitous throughout the Chiang Kai-shek's admittedly loose KMT coalition.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Cats, this ad is for you. Has your human ever called you picky, persnickety, choosy? If so, Perfect Bistro Cat Food is for you. With ingredients like wild-caught tuna and pasture-raised lamb, tantalizing textures, and delectable flavors that meet even the most discerning cat standards. You're not picky, you're just perfectionists. Perfect Bistro, mealtime perfection for every cat. Have your human visit perfectbistro.com.
Yeah. In 1944, President Roosevelt recalled Stilwell from China after tensions with Chiang Kai-shek reached a breaking point. Obviously, we know the Allies won World War II. But after World War II, Stilwell commands the U.S. 10th Army, later the 6th Army, before retiring. He dies in 1946 and remains one of the most controversial American generals of the war. What do you think his legacy is?
So, Stilwell, in my view, was a tactical genius. The campaigns he fought in northern Burma repeatedly outflanked and outmaneuvered the Japanese 18th Infantry Division and other infantry divisions, if we count against the Y Force's advances against the 56th Division or the 2nd Division, and they were able to effectively establish control over northern Burma, X-Force and Y-Force. And Stilwell deserves immense credit for his tactical conduct of these campaigns. However, his broader strategic decisions to arm X-Force and Y-Force with the Lend-Lease material that he had did come at the expense of units in central and southern China that did get caught up in the path of Operation Ichigo in 1944. These relatively ill-equipped forces suffered 90,000 deaths and led to the loss of China's control over all these provinces. The defeat of these forces at the strategic level did put Chiang Kai-shek and China on their heels, and meant that China was severely compromised from 1944 on forward. While the U.S. won the war in 45, China as a entity was pretty much knocked out, basically, or nearly knocked out. So this caused discord, the result of Operation Ichigo, between Chiang and Stilwell, as Chiang wanted to withdraw Y-Force across the Salween River back in September 1944 because of Operation Ichigo. Japan's summer offensive in central and southern China. And Stilwell was myopically focused on the fighting in northern Burma. He was not present at headquarters in Chongqing, and instead was kind of present with his forces in the northern Burmese jungle. And he was very much against Chiang Kai-shek's desire to withdraw Y force back to resist the Japanese advance in central and southern China. He told George Marshall, America's chief of staff, he said, to sum up, there is still a faint chance to salvage something in China, but action must be quick and radical, and the GMO must give one commander full powers. The chances are definitely not good, but I can see no other solution at this moment. Basically, Stilwell wanted to be entrusted with command of China's armies. Roosevelt agreed with Stilwell and sent a letter to Chiang, basically demanding that he should forfeit command of his troops to Stilwell. Stilwell presented this letter to Chiang Kai-shek, and then upon seeing the latter's reaction, said that the letter was like a harpoon that, quote, hit the little bugger right in the solar plexus and went right through him. Nonetheless, despite Stilwell's glee over the success of his political maneuvering, his maneuvering backfired because Chiang Kai-shek told U.S. Ambassador Patrick Hurley that he would accept any U.S. general as commander of his armies except Stilwell, and offered to even hand over his army's logistical apparatus to said general. This consequently led Hurley to recommend the withdrawal of Stilwell to Roosevelt, and he was withdrawn in 1944 in September. This is basically all of this is to say that Stilwell was very tactically adept and very tactically capable, but he was strategically maybe somewhat myopic and not very good at working with others, not very good at working with allies, despite his various experiences before the war that you would hope would lead to officers having those skills. Wow. His harsh, blunt personality rubbed people the wrong way. He was right about the corruption in China and the corruption in the KMT, as I mentioned earlier. That was really a pretty damning problem ultimately for Chiang Kai-shek and the KMT, and he was also right about the shortcomings of figures such as Chenault and their equally myopic view of air power alone being able to defeat the Japanese, but his blunt and harsh personality rubbed his contemporaries and allies and even many of his subordinates the wrong way.
It's an interesting legacy for sure. I appreciate you giving us the overview on him. Maybe he could have done some things politically a little better and played nicer with others, but it's just unfortunate.
I think William Slim said it best. He said that Stilwell was an excellent tactician, but a poor administrator. At higher levels, he had neither the temperament nor the strategic background or judgment to be effective. That was William Slim's assessment. And I think that that's a pretty good one, if we were just to give one in one sentence.
Yeah, and he was one of the best British generals of all time.
Most underrated. One of the most underrated, William Slim.
Absolutely. We thank Quin for that overview. Thank you, my friend, of Vinegar Joe. That was good stuff. Again, please check out Quin Cho's books, The Rise of the Kwangtung Army on Amazon, or Competing Empires in Burma, Chronicles of...
The Competing Empires in Burma, a chronicle of the China-Burma-India Theater of World War II.
All right. Thank you for your time, my friend, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Uncovered windows can make your home feel up to 20 degrees hotter. Stay cool and save up to 45% off custom window treatments during the Summer Black Friday mega sale at Blinds.com. From outdoor shades to room darkening blinds, finding the perfect fit is easy. Get free samples, expert design help, and professional measure and install services, or DIY with confidence and support every step of the way. Shop up to 45% off site-wide, plus huge savings on doorbusters right now during the Summer Black Friday mega sale at Blinds.com.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
For having me on.